Oh, well, hey there. Nice to see folks. All right, I got a little chat box here. Okay, enjoy your dinner, Lisa. We'll miss seeing you while you're eating. All right, folks, it's 7 o'clock. Here it is. It's Tuesday. If it's Tuesday, I feel like doing that opening to Meet the Press. You know, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. If it's Tuesday, it's Connected, Jewish Wisdom in an Age of Isolation. Nice to see some of you folks. Welcome to show number 6, week number 2. And welcome to anyone that's watching us from outside the fishbowl. I know we're streaming on jewishLIVE. I think maybe on their Facebook feed or on YouTube or something like that. So if you're out there looking at us and not participating, first, that's a little weird. And second of all, great, hi. Nice to see you folks. Thanks to the good people at Judaism Unbound and jewishLIVE for inviting us. Last night we were on for the first time. We're still trying to figure out the tech and how to do this stuff, but it's coming along. I also want to put a shout out for anyone that's listening, and thank you to the Kehillah Parent Association. You know, this is a program brought to you by Kehillah Jewish High School, primarily to connect our school community, but also happy to reach out to folks in wider concentric circles. And I'm especially thankful to our parent association for arranging for food to be delivered and picked up by staff, by faculty and staff of the school on Sunday. We had a drive-through farmers market. I'm not sure exactly how they managed to pull it off. I know Lisa helped, but tonight in my house we had fresh pineapple and we had tacos with fresh vegetables, and I'm sure a lot of other people on the team have benefited from that. So enormous gratitude to the parent association. Timothy Hood and Shelley Smith, our co-chairs. We appreciate it. We appreciate it. So it's week 3 of coronavirus, and I don't know about anybody else. Well, actually, I do. I spoke to about a half a dozen people today, and they said they had a similar experience of yesterday feeling like a little bit of a downer. I was having a bit of a downer yesterday. I don't know if you were having a downer, but I think I've decided that Monday is the new hump day. You wake up on Monday and you're like, oh, we're still here. We're still here. And so Monday was a little tough. And last night, you know, I had some challenging sleep, woke up in a couple of panic attacks. It was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? So if you're feeling some of that, you're not alone. And I hope I'm not alone feeling some of that. Tuesday feels a little bit better, although every day does seem to be merging into one long Groundhog Day. So yes, Elaine, thank God we are still here. V'halo chai ani, behold, we are still alive. It's true, but I'm not in denial about the panic. There's a little bit of panic, you know, and I think that's reasonable and understandable. So just wanted to name that. So as is our custom, I guess let's just take a couple of minutes. I'm going to ring a bell and we'll just sit quietly, just settle a little bit, kind of get here, maybe try to take our minds away from wherever else they may be and just sit and take it easy. Just knowing you're sitting, being here. Nothing to do right now, nowhere to go, nothing to fix, just here. Just allowing yourself to feel your breath. Notice what's on your mind, where your thoughts are. Just bring your attention back to here, sitting now. Maybe just allow a small smile on your face. Just thankful for this time. So I was thinking maybe this evening, if people feel so moved, looks like we have a smaller group in the room than we've had, but if people are so moved, maybe you want to just express some gratitude despite it all, something you feel grateful for. You could type it into the chat box, or if you're feeling especially brave, you can unmute yourself and just go ahead and share with the group here something you're grateful for at this time.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Even though one of the people I work for is in the screen, what I will admit to being grateful for is that I'm finally getting the opportunity to tune into some of the meditations and riches out there that are being offered right now. So I'm grateful for that.
Thanks.
Don't tell anyone.
Thanks, Elaine. So thankful for the sun shining. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, the sun is shining. Another one for amazing weather. I'm grateful for the air. It just feels especially pure right now. Just it's a pleasure to breathe. Anyone else want to throw in some gratitude? All right, well, you keep thinking about that. You know, there's a lot of things to be, I think, worried about, but there's also a lot of things to be grateful for. So just invite people to be thinking about that. And sometimes making a list of things you're grateful for can be a really helpful activity. I do that sometimes. Just make a list. You start to realize there's a lot to be grateful for, even despite it all. At the same time, I'm going back to last week, and I think the first or second show, I'm also thinking about Jewish weddings and breaking glasses. You know, even at the happiest of days, celebrating the love between two people. At Jewish weddings, we break a glass to recognize that the world is still broken. So I don't know about you, but I'm starting to hear names of people that are closer and closer to me that are not just ill, but in fact, I now know 4 people who have died, friends of friends, relatives of friends, and it's starting to feel more real. And so at the same time we express gratitude, maybe we just take a moment and think about, you know, people who are ill and in need of healing, and people who may have just who've already lost. Lahavdil ben Chaim lamavet, as they say in the Jewish tradition, we have to make a distinction between the living and the dying. It's always a hard transition. But this morning I was on a call with Rabbi Lord, Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. I'm not sure how to say his titles correctly. And he had a very powerful message of optimism for educators, for Jewish educators, that as bad as it all is, you know, education is the most optimistic of professions, because You can only get into education if you believe there's a chance that tomorrow might be better than today. And it was nice to hear him, nice to hear his voice. You know, back when I was 17 or 18 years old and I wasn't trying to figure out stuff. I wasn't that self-aware yet, but stumbling through my late teens, Rabbi Sachs was kind enough to provide the funds so that I could go to Israel after high school to spend a year studying in Israel. Our family couldn't afford it, and so in many ways, you know, I feel enormous gratitude to him personally for him kind of sending me on my way, and it was nice to hear that message. So with that in mind, we are so blessed this evening to be able to talk about Jewish education and who knows what else with one of the real experts in the field, Professor Ari Kelman. Ari, give us a wave. I'm going to give you a proper formal introduction. But before I do, just to set it up, last night we talked about Jewish wisdom. And just a brief summary, I said basically three things last night about Jewish wisdom. The first thing I said was that Jewish wisdom is human wisdom. As all wisdom is human wisdom. It's all of ours. But as the case has been for much of Jewish history, the Jewish community hasn't had maybe as much an opportunity to share its wisdom with others as it might have, because we've often been on the run. And so in a strange way, this feels like a time when Jewish wisdom can be made more available and shared more widely. Second, I said that sometimes to learn the wisdom of the community into which you're born, you have to go outside of it to learn someone else's wisdom and then come back and realize it was here all the time. That certainly, I think, in part has been my journey. And I think that's often the case. And so given that the vast majority of human beings are not Jewish, seems to me an extraordinary opportunity to help others learn the wisdom of their own tradition by sharing with them the wisdom of our tradition. That sounds like all upside to me. And the third thing I said was that maybe that idea of having to go out and come back is actually a fundamental truth about what it means to be Jewish. You know, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Tanakh, we're not called Jews, we're called Israelites. Before that, we're called Hebrews. You know, Abraham was the first Hebrew, and Hebrew means crossover. And he had to cross over to be able to come back. In his case, he had to go hang out with the Amorites and learn about the covenant with God from them before he could come back and understand his own covenant. And so it seems to me there's something deep in there about us having to go out to other contexts and come back. So with that as a setup a little bit, let me tell you a little bit about our guest, Professor Ari Kelman. Ari Kelman is the Jim Joseph Professor of Education and Jewish Studies and the Director of the Concentration in Education and Jewish Studies at the Graduate School of Education at Stanford University. His research focuses on the myriad ways in which people cultivate religious commitments and the ways that people learn religion across domains, including schools, congregations, museums, camps, media, and online. He's the author of two books, Shout to the Lord, Making Worship Music in Evangelical America, and Station Identification, A Cultural History of Yiddish Radio. He's the editor and co-editor of three other books and author of a number of articles about contemporary Jewish identity and culture. And not only is he Elaine's boss, he's also my boss this year and was kind enough to invite me to be a visiting scholar at the Graduate School of Education. Ari Kelman, welcome to Connected.
Thanks, Darren. It's great. It's great to be here. Thank you for the introduction and the wisdom from the top.
It's good to see you. To start, how are you, man?
I'm coping, you know. Obviously, everybody's coping, and it's sort of, you know, every day is like a struggle for perspective. I feel like in our little house and our little family, we have our things going on. Trying to manage school for my kids and work for me and my wife, and time and space for people to take care of their own needs, but also, you know, but we're here because there's this greater thing going on, and trying to not check the news after about 4 o'clock so I can sleep at night has been useful for me, which is not my was not my way prior to this. Trying to figure out what we can do that's meaningful, while keeping our eyes on the fact that there's this very big, globally, historically transformative thing happening, that we're a part of in a small way.
Yeah.
But you can hear the hoofbeats at the door.
Yeah. I'm going to try that not checking the news after 4 o'clock thing. Maybe that's what's keeping me up at night. That's a good one.
It's working so far.
That's a good one. I'm gonna do that. Well, just for a little while, at least for the next 14 minutes, I guess we're going to pretend that that's all not happening, and try to, give the folks that are listening in also a chance to forget about that just for a little while. So you lead this program at Stanford called the Concentration in Education and Jewish Studies. What is that? What do you do? Tell us about it.
So in my job at Stanford, I do my own research. The concentration is sort of a hub of a couple of different things. It's a hub for research that I'm interested in, with respect to Jewish education and religion more generally and more broadly. And it's a place where I train graduate students who are working directly with me, but also who are just sort of come across my door, who are interested in those similar kinds of questions. So I get people who are asking what I think of as are really interesting questions about how people learn to be Jewish, or how people learn to develop a religious sensibility for themselves. And that's what I do. So I work with graduate students. I do my own research. I do research with graduate students, and then I do the normal stuff that professors do, teaching and advising and those kinds of things outside of that. Sometimes we do more basic research of the sort where it's like, I have a question about this, so let's write about it. Or let's do the research and let's write about it. Sometimes I try to respond to contemporary events. And sometimes we do work that is sort of was raised by somebody else that we get a chance to explore. So we have a lot of latitude in the kinds of questions we can do, and we're very fortunate to be in a place where we can pick and choose the questions that we want to ask and the ways that we want to ask them. So
you said,
growing researchers.
Sorry, thank you. You just said one of the questions is like, how do people learn to be Jewish? In my case, I grew up in a family where Judaism was really not present. It was present in a couple of very subtle ways. On Passover, my mom bought matzah and there was a mezuzah on the door, but that was about it. So the way I learned to be Jewish was, I shipped off to a seminary, in the hills to the south of Jerusalem, and essentially learned how to be Jewish from a book, either the Shulchan Aruch, a Jewish law code, or the Mishnah Berurah, another Jewish law code. But I don't know that that's the way a lot of people learn how to be Jewish. So what do you see?
No, you are extraordinary, Darren, in many ways. No, so most people learn from a variety of different sources, not from books. I don't think that books are where most people get their sense of commitment to Jewish stuff. And when I say learn to be Jewish, I definitely don't mean that they need to identify as Jewish. I think the Jewish community, if we're looking sort of demographically, sociologically, the American Jewish community nowadays, especially outside of the Orthodox community, there are lots of people who don't have Jewish identities, who are members of Jewish families, who are members of Jewish communities, who are also learning to be Jewish in that way. That is to say, learn to participate in a Jewish world. So when I think about learning to be Jewish, I mean it in that variety of ways. Obviously, family is important. Obviously, school is important. And then there's all these other factors. And is it the kind of thing? And one of the questions that I'm asking that it will probably take the rest of my professional career to even begin to build an answer toward is, what are the kinds of experiences, what are the kinds of exposure that drive people toward a kind of deeper, more meaningful engagement with Jewish knowledge, with Jewish life, with with a Jewish community of some form or fashion. Is it the kind of short, intense, Israel trip type experience where it's 10, like take Birthright Israel as an example? Is it like 10 days of very intense activity? Can that have the kind of effect that I think builds healthy Jewish communities, that does that have a bigger effect than something that's sort of more idiosyncratic, maybe smaller, less amplitude, maybe, but smaller over a more sustained period of time? So I'm interested in all of those things. And then there's this incredible range of stories when you go out and you interview people or you survey people. It's an incredible range of stories of backgrounds and experiences that people share, that I have the good fortune of being able to hear all the time, about how it is that they understand themselves in relationship to Jewishness in a world, and how they move through the world holding that.
So how does you're also interested in exploring how people develop religious commitments. So is learning how to be Jewish or how to be in Jewish community the same as developing religious commitments? Do they overlap, but they're different? Like, what's the relationship there?
They overlap. I think Judaism is a sort of an odd duck in American religions, because it overlaps so strongly with other modes of engaging in Jewish community and Jewish life. American Jews, if you think about the kind of hallmarks of American religion as being, belief and relationship to the Bible. I remember I was in church for the Christian music book that I wrote one time, and it was one of my first times in church on a Sunday, and the pastor was like, "Pull out your Bibles." I didn't have mine with me, so I looked on with my neighbor or whatever. He was very friendly, but like I was kind of like, oh, if my house was on fire and I had to grab one book, like the Christian guy sitting next to me would grab the Bible, but Jews would probably grab a Siddur. Like if I was going to travel with a Jewish book, I would travel with a Siddur. So one's relationship to text, like those kinds of things are different. And Jews tend to, on the main, score pretty low when it comes to belief as a kind of hallmark of religion, score very low when it comes to textual engagement as a hallmark of religion. But they do all these other social things. They belong in big numbers to Jewish organizations, and so on, that indicate that religion may not be the only container or the only kind of category for understanding American Jewish life, at least. So they overlap, and I'm interested in the ways that ideological commitments of all kinds are formed. I don't have the bandwidth to do all of that research, unfortunately, but I sort of wonder if one's connection to Jewish life is similar to one's affinity for a sports team or a band. If it's possible that we could think about religious experience in the same way that we think about artistic experience, sort of the sublime and things like that. I think they're continua, or I think they're maybe overlapping phenomena that are worth explaining.
Can you say more about like, what does the prayer book represent that the Bible doesn't, and vice versa? Like, what is that? Okay, so Jews would pick the Siddur. Yeah. So what does that mean? What does that tell us about Jews?
Maybe I was wrong about that, but it was an insight I felt like it felt right for my experience anyway. Like, I don't know, maybe there are Jews that would grab the Torah. I mean, we're, in American Protestantism anyway, the key relationship to the text is sola scriptura. It's me and the text, and the text speaks directly to me. And in the Jewish tradition, we're told not to interpret the text literally. We're told that there should be, we need these layers of interpretation to engage with the text. And I, some of that is also my house, where I grew up in a household that was very ritually engaged, but wasn't, we learned, but like, I would say we were much more ritually engaged. And that was all the domestic and sort of communal rituals that a Jewish life could imagine. But it wasn't like, if I had to pick a book that was going to guide my Jewish life as my house is burning down, it would be the Siddur, not the Bible. There's sort of more direction in that.
Fascinating. So, but and I imagine there is some portion of the American Jewish community, at least, for whom neither the Bible nor the prayer book would be the book they would take. And so, but who still, I think, if we're to believe the Pew survey and other demographic studies, who still feel like their identity as Jews is a significant part of their sense of self.
Oh yeah.
And so, are they in the conversation about religious commitments, or are they not? I mean, where do they fit in that picture?
So I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had with all of those people, right? Pew, one of the findings of the Pew report, one of the public findings of the Pew report was 93% of American Jews are proud to be Jewish, which everybody was kind of like, that's great. And I agree, it is great. But if we're talking about a Jewish community in which individual identities are sort of counted, quite literally, if we want to take the Pew example, then yeah, all those people are in the conversation. And the question isn't, is there one way, is there one path or one sort of set of expressions that are more legitimate than others? I think there's a lot of expressions. If the door is quite so wide open, the question is, what do you do with a community that has both a strong sense of attachment, strong sense of pride among people within it, but also very porous borders and very fluid ways of identifying? You know, unlike the Catholic Church or the Church of Latter-day Saints, where that's so highly centralized, right? I mean, American Jews have never gone for centralized leadership in the history of American Jewry. You know, the first splinter synagogue was in 1815. You know, goes way, like, that history goes way back. It is deep.
Fascinating. Well, I guess what's the question is coming up for me is, I assume, I'm not sure about this, but I assume that the work you're doing and your graduate students are doing cannot merely, maybe that's too harsh a word, cannot only be to describe the best methodologies for cultivating Jewishness, right? That's also a kind of an act of counting. Is there time and energy being devoted to maybe desirable outcomes? Like, to what end? Is it just about, you know, getting more Jews to be Jewish, or is it about people who are going to engage with Judaism for some greater, you know, purpose?
I mean, if we're not engaging that question, then we're just you know, pushing peas around the plate, which is fine. We can do that.
Yeah. So tell me how you are engaging.
Not that interesting to me. Well, I'm interested not just in asking questions about, if I'm interested in this, in how people develop religious commitments, I'm interested in understanding, like, sort of sociologically, culturally, developmentally, how and where that happens. And my hunch is that buried in there is a kind of logic or wisdom that isn't found very often in books. If it echoes with the books, that's great. It means that somebody a long time ago probably had that same insight and then decided to write it down, but it doesn't come directive. It's not a directive. And I'm not interested in building a kind of normative model as much as I am in investigating the variety of ways in which it happens and coming up with a kind of deeper understanding for how it happens. Not because I think there's one way, but because clearly the way we think about the world shapes how we act in the world. And if the enterprise of Jewish education, sort of like you said at the beginning, you know, isn't one of hope, and the hope is that that the future is going to be better than the past, the contribution that I think we can make on this score is how are we sort of trying to figure out how to build people whose commitments are driving them to do better in the world and contribute in a positive way, and understand how to hold on to things like uncertainty, to understand how to have disagreements that are fierce and serious and respectful and in the service of something higher, not in the service of kind of, you know, egos or doctrine or dogma. Right. And those things go deep in the tradition, I think.
Certainly, I agree. I think they do run deep in the tradition. Do you think that some version of what you just said is the collective agenda for Jewish education in the American Jewish community as it currently manifests?
No. I think the American Jewish community is coming out of a long period in which survival was the main goal, whether it was through its relationship to Israel or just, in the wake of the Holocaust, right?
Yes.
It was a collective trauma and a serious issue. And if you read sort of American Jewish, you know, sociology for the second half of the 20th century and into the 21st, a lot of the effort is on survival. And I think existentially, the question, survival for what, has been asked over and over again, and there's never been nobody's ever given a great answer. I don't think there is an answer. I think everybody's got to come up with their answer on their own, and the question is how to equip people with the tools so that they can come up with that answer. And then if that answer aligns with Jewishness, then that's great. But I don't think that survival for its own sake is a sufficient motivation, I think, and it's certainly not a sufficient logic.
Well, it's 7:30, so we'll just leave people with that cliffhanger. There's a lot there. I feel like we just scratched the surface, but I'm grateful for you making the time. I just want to point out that tonight's song selections also came from Ari, and so we're gonna round it out.
Oh, it's gonna be.
We're gonna round it out with some Bowie. Give me a second, Ari. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Darren. Thanks everybody for spending your half an hour with me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been our pleasure.